Thank you. So I'm not sure Happy Lama Tsongkhapa Day is actually the right way of saying it. Is there a Tibetan phrase for Tashi Delayed Lama Tsongkhapa? I don't know. Do you know? Okay, Happy Lama Tsongkhapa Day for everyone. I wanted to, this will actually change our format just a little bit this morning, because I wanted to talk a little teeny tiny bit about Lama Tsongkhapa, and in honor of him, use some of his beautiful poetry as a part of our refuge visualization this morning. I want to praise this book, The Splendor of an Autumn Moon. It's translated by Gavin Kilty, and if I love reading Tsongkhapa direct. I like reading the Lamrim Chenmo. The commentaries are nice, but personally, I just like he's just. And I haven't read a lot of Tsongkhapa, but I got an impression of this kind of, the clarity of his mind, and he's so direct, so logical. You just follow what he's saying. And then this book came out, which for me showed a whole different side of Je Rinpoche, that because I don't speak Tibetan, it's not going to happen in this life, about the kind of almost the ecstatic praise he has for various Buddhas and so forth. So you get the sense of the yogi coming through in the poetry that comes from this book. So I really actually had a chance to meet Gavin Kilty. When I realized who he was, I thought, the first thing I said to him is, "Oh, thank you for translating that text." I said, it gave me a whole different view of Tsongkhapa, and he said, that was my intent, that was my hope. So anyway, we'll tap into this a little bit today. Probably everybody here knows, but I'm not sure that everybody here knows that Je Rinpoche is one of Tibet's greatest philosophers. And of course, at the Abbey, our practice lineage directly goes to Tsongkhapa. Of course, he had his detractors too. But the thing that really, I think, and he wrote not just the Lamrim Chenmo, which we know, all of our Lamrim teachings come from Lama Atisha, of course, but then his expansion of that in all the different forms that they do. We have everything from the 3 English volumes of Lamrim Chenmo to the text that we recite, 3 principal aspects of the path that we recite regularly, foundation of all good qualities that people are hopefully sometime reading in their context of their meditation. So the very short ones too. And he also wrote extensively on Tantra. And the real, I guess the thing that we most celebrate is his capacity to have clarified the Buddha's intent, or Nagarjuna's intent, about emptiness and dependent arising coming to the same point, proving in a really clear way how things can be empty of inherent existence and yet still exist. How they exist, what that means conventionally, and how even existing conventionally, they are empty of inherent existence. And that point is the one that actually helps to realize the ultimate nature, or helps the ultimate kind of realization that leads to being able to be awakened. And he said, it is said, that Lama Tsongkhapa, an ordinary being who had a whole lot of imprints, attained omniscience after his parinirvana. But that's what happened after his death. He was able to use this path to become fully awakened. That's what they say. So today, Lama Tsongkhapa Day, we celebrate or commemorate that parinirvana. It's not like there's a specific date of the year. It's on the Tibetan lunar calendar, and I am mystified by how that works. It's not the same as the Chinese lunar calendar, which I'm also mystified by, but we go by what they say on the people who do know how, put it on the website, and then we know it's time. So what we'll do then, we'll start with, I'm just going to read some verses of his praise to the Buddha. Then we'll do the visualization in kind of a short form. Then we'll do a little bit of the practice, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so we'll start with just a few minutes of silence to get us present. And just reflect for the moment the kind of compassion that must have been required, surely was required, for the ordinary being who became Shakyamuni Buddha to cultivate over eons. The kind of compassion that never gave up, looking for the means to liberate himself and sentient beings from suffering. The kind of compassion that lifetime after lifetime after lifetime work towards creating the causes to become fully awakened. By recognizing the situation of each sentient being in terms of the dukkha and the fact that we are propelled by our karma and afflictions pretty helplessly until we wake up to that fact. Through realms of existence that are kind of unspeakably difficult to even imagine, both in the depths of the suffering that could be induced and also the depths of the pleasure that could be enjoyed and yet still pass away. And why did Buddha do it? And so we go forward another 13, 14, maybe 15 centuries to Je Rinpoche, Lama Tsongkhapa, born in Tibet. We don't have the great depth of history of his previous lives, but unmistakably the imprints that he too had cultivated over countless time in order to ripen in that lifetime in the way that it did, also compelled by incredible compassion. Like, what made him do that? We think the living example of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who we can see in action, we can hear his voice, we can hear his words. If you've been in his presence, you know that soon after he's in any place, the people around get very happy, whether they're going to the teachings or not. What kind of compassion is that? I mean, there have been 14 Dalai Lamas, but way before that first recognition, the continuity of this consciousness was propelled by great compassion. And without glorifying and putting our own precious teachers on a pedestal, which all of them would hate to be on, we look at how tirelessly they share the Dharma in the world. The kind of fortitude it takes to guide disciples like me, I will say us. How much compassion over how many lifetimes generated in order to be able to share the Dharma in that way. Why did they do that? And so we think about our own motivation for practicing the Dharma today in this life. Acknowledging that we didn't come here by accident, that we've created causes too. And acknowledging that we're not yet Jay Rinpoche, I'm not. But inspired by their example to think, why did they do that? How did they do that? Can I do that? Will I do that? Who will benefit? Having confidence that the beneficiaries will be every living being. And so let's take a moment to generate our own sense of commitment to great compassion, growing that quality in our heart. Making that the focus of this session, this day, of our celebration day of Lama Tsongkhapa, and of all of our life. So we start the visualization this morning by visualizing amidst an ocean of Samantabhadra offerings, in the middle of a spacious throne of precious jewels, is a smaller radiant throne, and on that, on cushions of lotus, sun, and moon, a root spiritual mentor in the aspect of Shakyamuni Buddha appears. His body of pure golden radiant light is adorned with all the marks and beauties of a Buddha. He wears the robes of a monastic, and rays brighter than the sun radiate from his body. And we think, glorious body bathing in splendor of its golden glow, voice unrivaled even by melodies of celestial music, mind brighter than 10 million suns, guide supreme for infinite living beings, paragon of the Shakyas. Moon and stars on a cloudless night appear crystal clear in the midst of a lake. so in the clear waters of my untroubled mind are your qualities reflected, one by one. Fingertips fold at my heart like a lotus touched by moonlight. Single-pointedly I hold you before me. You of great compassion, heed this modest praise. Mind as deep as an ocean, words resounding like the celestial drum, body taller even than Meru. You are meaningful to see, hear, and bring to mind. Therefore, until under the Bodhi tree I emerge victorious over the hosts of Maras, I prayed to be cared for life after life by you, and never tire of your nectar-like words. To let your mind reflect for a moment on the qualities of the Buddha. Then in the space to his right sits Maitreya, surrounded by the spiritual mentors of the lineage of extensive deeds. On the left is Manjushri, the spiritual mentors of the lineage of the profound view. In front of Buddha Shakyamuni is our own root spiritual mentor, and the aspect of giving teachings, surrounded by the spiritual mentors with whom we have a Dharma connection. In the space behind Buddha Shakyamuni sits Vajradhara, victorious lord of myriad tantras, also surrounded by lineage, this time spiritual mentors of the blessings of the practice. Hold those figures in mind. And around these are the four highest yoga tantra deities with their retinue. Yusamaja, Chakrasambhara, Vajrabhairava, and Kalachakra with their mandalas. Around these, all the meditational deities, Buddhas, 12 Bodhisattvas, solitary realizer arhats, hero arhats, dakas, dakinis, the Dharma protectors. On either side of the lineage of spiritual mentors who conferred instructions and so forth on the Vinaya, the Sutra, Abhidharma, and the Tantra. For beautiful stands with their teachings of the Holy Dharma. Brilliant texts radiating light, vibrating with the sound of the teaching. And then surrounding us are the beings of all the 6 realms. Ordinary beings who don't share the realizations of the holy beings in front of us. Therefore, we're overwhelmed by our problems, our difficulties, and the sufferings of samsara. We've migrated and wandered through these realms of existence since beginningless time. And now, having had the opportunity to see a possibility of a way that's different, we seek protection and guidance from all the spiritual mentors and the three jewels in the space in front. Not wishing to do this journey alone, but to do it on behalf of all these kind beings with whom we've shared this path's or ordinary existence for so long. We lead them in taking refuge. Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. I take refuge until I am awakened in the Buddha's Dharma and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am awakened in the Buddha's Dharma and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha's Dharma and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I confess all my destructive actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the virtues of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until cyclic existence ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate all the virtues of myself and others to the Great Awakening. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. The objects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, friends, enemies, and strangers, my body, wealth, and enjoyments, I offer these without any sense of loss. Please expect them with pleasure. and inspire me and others to be free from the three poisonous attitudes. Idam Gurana Mandala Kamniryatayami. We'll start with doing a few of the whole refuge formula. And then when you're ready, just simply switch to the whichever particular object of refuge you're working on right now. We'll do that quietly for a while. Namo Guravya Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sangha Namo Guravya. Namo Guravya Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sangha Namo Guravya Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sangha Namo Guravya Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sangha. Again, take a moment to bask in the light of the mantra recitation, the visualization, and also feel a sense of having purified. And then in your own time, dissolve the visualization from the outside in. All the figures in the field absorbing into the central figure of Shakyamuni Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha comes to the crown of your head and dissolves into you. Your mind and the Buddha's mind are inseparable. So meditate on how that's so. The emptiness of your mind, the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. There are so many beautiful praises of the Buddha. So many, so many. So you can bring them in. Let that enhance the visualization, let that enhance our feeling, and if that works for you. Some people are not into poetry at all, but that kind of thing inspires you. Use it. Use it to help kind of brighten your mind and bring that feeling of closeness and connection. I wanted to start today with a little bit of review about the practice. I've gotten a number of questions, sort of technical questions about the practice, and so I want to respond. Somebody wanted to clarify what exactly is the framework, what is all encompassed in the ngondro practice, okay? So it's the whole thing from beginning to end, from taking refuge at the beginning, from setting up the visualization to dedicating at the end, and then all the mantras in between. So it's not the case that just sitting down and starting mantra is the ngondro, and it's not the case that you can just do the meditation and throw out the mantra. You have to do the whole thing. And you should do the whole thing within a session. That said, given that you're doing numbers and numbers and numbers of sessions a day, it's good to set up all of the preliminary practices that Venerable Tarpo has been teaching us about in your first session. But you may be able to very quickly, in the next session after that, go to taking refuge and then getting right to the recitation. Right? So that's definitely possible when you're doing it so many sessions a day. If you're doing it at home, The fact that you set up the preliminary practices yesterday doesn't really qualify when you come to do it again today. So like that. Somebody asked about the recitations. So there's a number of different ways to do that. You can do, I'm going to read this right. You can recite the Namo Guruvya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. You can do all four 100,000 times. 111,100, well, actually 111 times. If you have a mala, it's 108 beads, 100,000's pretty darn close. You could also do some of those at the beginning of each session and then do each of the refuge objects one at a time. 100,000 Buddhayas, and then 100,000 Dharmayas, then 100,000 Sanghayas, then 100,000 Guruvyas. That's Venerable Chödrön's recommended order, especially for new to the practice. If you've been doing this for a long time and you're really confident that Guruvya is where you want to start, that's also fine. 100,000 of those, then 100,000 Buddhayas, 100,000 Dharmayas, Sanghaya. Doing it again in retreat, we have a luxury really of being able to really to sink into each one. Some of the questions have come from people doing it at home. You can still do it in that order, and just do at least one full session every day. Now, I promised someone that I was going to even record this, but I haven't gotten around to doing it. But the request was, would you time it? So I did. Namo Guruvya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, in a leisurely pace, took 4.5 minutes. You could do a number of malas in a single day. The Namo Guruvya itself took 55 seconds to do a mala. Buddhaya took 60 seconds to do a mala. So, I mean, the speed at which you do it is totally up to you. But you can do it quickly and keep your mind focused on the refuge object, and also still do some of the reflections that are suggested in the text. The only way to get the feel for how to do that is to do it. And the more you do it, the more you'll get the feel for how to do it. So just dive in and go for it. And don't worry. I mean, I think there was some concern that 100,000 just seems like an overwhelming number if you're doing it at home. Like how many years would it take? And you know, it might take years. It doesn't have to. But if it does, okay. Hopefully we're taking refuge for the rest of our life. And the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So if it takes a long time, that's okay. That's okay. The main thing is just that you keep the continuity going. That every single day you're doing some part of this. And you do need to do a whole mala. But, you know, 55 seconds is not too bad. So if anybody had the impression that you need to do it by chanting it at the rate that we do, Namo Guruvya, Namo, that's going to take some time. And it could be quite beautiful. I don't know. I don't have that kind of patience. But that's not necessary. You can just do Namo Guruvya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya at a speed at which you can kind of maintain your own concentration and so forth. I think that was the list of questions this time. Any other questions that are kind of technical like that? Yeah.
So I'm assuming that people who are doing retreat from afar wouldn't necessarily have to complete the ngondro. They could still benefit by doing 10,000 of each.
Oh, sure they could.
So it doesn't have to be quite so tight or strict, or
no.
But there's still a lot of benefit to be found by doing the practice.
Yes, that's definitely true. Thanks for bringing that up. It's not a requirement that you do the ngondro if you're going to do retreat from afar. But a lot of people would, I think, from retreat from afar would really like to do the ngondro. And so it just takes as long as it takes. It's okay. I mean, even prostrations, for example. So almost everybody here has either done it or is working on their 100,000 prostrations. Some years are involved in that. It's okay. You just get them done every single day, and we accumulate both the purification and the merit. That's what, I think I said this at the very beginning, but now that it makes more sense again, when Venerable did a whole talk on the value of ngondro practices, they are purifying our minds and they are helping us cultivate merit. That's really the purpose. To purify our minds, cultivate merit so that we are a more receptive, more fertile field. Our mind is a more receptive, fertile field for the Dharma seeds that are dropped into it. We feed them better and better the more we clear out the garbage in our mind. And although, how can you say logically, how does this work? I don't know. There may not be a logical explanation, but I do know, we have done them, and the people who have taught us know that this is effective. It clears the mind, it does. Cleans the mind. So it's valuable. And the thing about the 100,000, again, not necessary. I mean, we definitely get benefit, as Venerable Sepul said. And the thing about the 100,000 is that we keep at it. We keep at it. It keeps us, builds our tenacity, our determination, because we're going to need that. The more I think about why the heck and how long it took the Buddha and how long it took Jay Rinpoche, it's like, I need to work on my joyous effort to keep going. Okay, so we've talked about Buddha. We've talked about the Dharma. Today we're going to talk about the Sangha. And they all, they are all interrelated, of course. Again, we start at the very beginning, and it's good to repeat again and again the causes for taking refuge. Number one, recognizing our situation in samsara. At one level, it's recognizing possibility of rebirth in the lower realms, which we're kind of not inclined to think about too much, I must admit. But it would be good for us to think about it. Take this opportunity, actually. As Geshe Topke said, I've quoted it before, you would be better off visualizing yourself as an animal, visualizing yourself as a hell being, something, a lower realm being, than trying to visualize yourself as a deity. We would learn more from it, for sure. And that would spark our wish to take refuge, and to deepen it from some place of real conviction. And then, of course, seeing that samsara itself is a mess, no matter where you're reborn, upper or lower, and then wishing to become Buddha, to do that for the benefit of all beings. So that's one level, and then having confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha to guide us. This practice will build us our confidence. That's what we're looking for here. We have confidence in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha by reflecting, learning their qualities, reflecting on their qualities, deepening our understanding of how that affects us. So that's what we get here. And so then, we haven't talked about this, but there's many different ways of dividing, or maybe naming refuge. I don't think it's division, but there are things that are the causal refuge and then the resultant refuge. So the causal refuge are these exterior, outside of us, beings and situations. So the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha outside of us that are already realized. The resultant refuge are those things that we will become. We will become the Buddha. We will realize, we'll have those Dharma realizations in our own mind. And we will become Sangha, actually, before we become Buddha, through those realizations. So that's the resultant refuge. We can take refuge in both, even as we're doing this practice now, thinking about the Buddha we will become, thinking about what it's like to have these realizations in our mind. And imagining what it's like to have those realizations in their mind takes us to being what it would like to be the Sangha refuge today. So last week I quoted Geshe Sopa, I'm going to quote him again, where he said, once you recognize that the Buddha has attained the highest level of knowledge, compassion, power, or skill and freedom from all forms of misery and its causes, then you can be sure that the method the Buddha teaches is flawless. So when we are sure of the reliability of the Buddha, then we trust absolutely the teachings that the Buddha gives are flawless. That's our faith in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Dharma, which we said last week too, refers to both the meditations that lead to the various levels of realization and the resulting cessations. So the ultimate Dharma jewel is the realizations, cessations in the mind of any Harya being. The conventional Dharma jewel is the transmitted teaching, both the verbal and the realizational transmission of those, right? That's the conventional Dharma jewel. And one of the things I forgot to mention last week that I wanted to really say that Venerable Chögyam had made a strong point about, the scriptural Dharma, first of all, comes transmitted from teacher to student, from one generation to next. We're talking about the oral teachings here. We're not talking about Dharma books. Dharma books are the representation, and those teachings, even in the classics, are recorded in those texts. But her emphasis here was that it was the oral teaching that came from the Buddha, was memorized by those monastics, arhats, some of them, but maybe not all. No, Ananda wasn't an arhat until he later. Anyway, memorized those monastics that were able to transmit verbally from their memory the teachings that were passed on and passed on and passed on. And so she also was emphasizing how for us, it's important actually, even though we're not in the monasteries, we don't start memorizing at the age of 7 or 4 or 2 or 3, but for us to also do some memorization of the text. When the Tibetans had to flee their country under the assault of the communist Chinese, some left with texts. They left without much. His Holiness actually had the Lamrim Chenmo tucked in his chuba. That's the only book he carried out. But they also had in their minds the Dharma that they had assimilated over the course of their training. And that's what took them out, and that's what they began with in India again. So I don't remember now, and I couldn't find the source, but way back when I was first starting to study the Lamrim, there was a lot of talk at Dharma Friendship Foundation about this example that a Kadampa Geshe could recite the entire Lamrim outline. Do you remember exactly what this is? Mount a horse, right. From the time you put one foot in a stirrup to the other leg going into the other stirrup, they could recite the entire outline of the Lamrim Chenmo. I found that very inspiring. Right? So that's how clear it would be in their minds. So people who are young enough to have put some energy into memorizing some of this stuff, it's actually helpful. That's not the realized Dharma yet, but it is much deeper in our minds than it is the knowing where to look it up. It's also helpful to know where to look it up, I will add. But that was just something that she really emphasized, and I thought, yeah, we should, because especially now that the more digitized we all become, who needs to look it up? Control, click, oh, okay, there it is. But if we have to run, and we don't have our computer, we're stuck. We're stuck. So very good to do that. So then, if we trust the Dharma, trust in the Dharma naturally arises, this is from Geshe Sopa's commentary, trust in the Dharma naturally arises from faith in the Buddha. Once you know how and why the Dharma is reliable, you see that those who are properly practicing it can assist you in your practice. So once you trust the Dharma, you will naturally rely on the Sangha. So again, it's all well-founded in the trust of the Buddha first. And that is why I now understand they spend years, had a precious time of being introduced to Pramanavartika, why Dharmakirti spent all that time writing this his commentary on Dignaga's rational realization, proving the Buddha as a reliable guide. Proving. That's what. So the more we trust in the Buddha as a reliable guide, then out of that we trust the teachings, and we trust the teachings, then we trust those that are practicing and then one holding them well and can also transmit them to us are also reliable. We have confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. That's the second cause for taking refuge. Okay? Now, when we're taking refuge in the Arya Sangha, we are not taking refuge in everybody that comes to the Dharma Center. Arya Sangha is the Sangha refuge. The superior beings or noble beings who have realized emptiness directly and are on the way to the results of their own particular vehicle. So they're either on their way to nirvana or they're on their way to omniscience, full awakening, whichever path they've set themselves out on. They've seen reality directly. And this technical detail is really important. And I'm wondering about our vocabulary. I thought, we should really stop and define some terms here, I think, when we get to the Sangha. Sometimes, and I had this too. Do I still have it? Maybe. The Sangha refuge was the hardest to get for me. And several people have said that to me too. And of course, we have to understand what is that Sangha refuge, right? So they've seen reality directly. It's not an inferential understanding. It's not a conceptual understanding, but they have a direct perception, which means the result of that, having a direct perception, is you begin to have some part of all the defilements that are eliminated on the path. So you begin to have that wisdom begins to start cutting away at the things that cause us to stay in samsara. They start cutting away at the afflictions that are in the mind. And eventually they rout out the seeds. Now that's kind of major. So refuge in the Arya beings, let's talk about who that is in the refuge field. So, and I'm going to start. So, who are the Arya beings in our refuge field? Don't go there yet. Don't go there yet. The way we're going to line them out is going to look like first the row of bodhisattvas, the solitary realizer arhats, the hero arhats, the dakas dakinis, the dharma protectors who have realized emptiness, right? Right. So that's kind of who you think the first wave of light is coming from when we take refuge in the Sangha. But Venerable Pema is totally right. The Buddha is also an Arya. All the Buddhas. So essentially, everything in that field is also generating the light in the Sangha refuge. You get why the Buddha is also an Arya? Right? Okay. But, or and, we're particularly taking refuge in those beings who have already developed that realization and who can transmit their understanding to some extent, whose minds are tamed to various levels of extent, right? So we've said what an Arya is. An Arya is a being who has realized emptiness directly. The circle of bodhisattvas are actually Arya bodhisattvas, right? So there are five bodhisattva paths: path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more learning. Some bodhisattvas on the path of even accumulation have realized emptiness, but not all. Only until, conceptually, but only until the path of seeing have any of them had the direct realization. So it's bodhisattvas from the path of seeing on that are in that refuge field, if you want to be that technical, and some people are clearly about that. And a bodhisattva is a person who has developed spontaneous altruistic intention. So has generated spontaneous bodhicitta. But an Arya bodhisattva is one who has also realized emptiness directly. And they are the conventional Sangha Jewel. All of these, the ultimate Sangha Jewel is actually the realizations in their mind, just like the Dharma Jewel. Realizations and cessations. Realizations and cessations in their mind. So then, if that's an Arya, what's an Arhat? Yeah, an Arhat's an Arya, but what is an Arhat? Why are we talking about what rows of Arhats? So the Arya beings have realized emptiness directly. The Arhats have completely eliminated all of the afflictive obscurations. Not the cognitive. Arhats, yeah. They are still all liberated.
You have the solitary realizer Arhats, you have the Pratyeka Buddha Arhat, and you have the Bodhisattva Arhats who are Buddhas. So
Yeah.
there are three different kinds of Arhats who have destroyed different things.
Right, but they are all Arhats. They have different labels, but they are all Arhats. So when we say you have a circle of solitary realizer and Pratyeka Buddha Arhats and solitary realizer Buddha Arhats are the same thing.
They're qualitatively different.
Pratyeka Buddhas and solitary realizers? That's the translation.
No, I said the hearers Arhats, the solitary.
Yeah, hearers and
So
hearers
the
and
three
solitary.
different,
Yeah,
the three
definitely.
qualitatively different.
Definitely, but the definition of an Arhat is
The
the
full
same.
destroyer.
Is the same.
It's like saying I have graduated from
Yes, and they all
grade
have.
school, I have graduated from university, I'm a graduate.
Yes, and they all have. Yeah, here are Arhats, solitary realizer Arhats, Bodhisattva are also Arhats, but they all are Arhats. That's the first definition, and they all have eliminated the afflictive obscurations. Yes? Yeah. So the solitary realizers are qualitatively different. They have tons and tons and tons more merit. They've worked far, far longer. They seek liberation. They meditate on the 12 links of dependent arising as their object of meditation. That's how they become liberated. It takes them 100 eons, very long time. And they're interesting in that they, although they have relied on teachers in the past and their last life before they become Arhats, they are committed to not relying on a teacher, but to do it on their own. And they don't speak. They only teach by gestures. Don't ask me how that works. Maybe someone knows. I mean, practical ways. Yeah.
Percent of communication is nonverbal.
It's true.
So they are communicating, they're just not using words.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've met one.
Yeah, I don't
But
know. We wouldn't
I'll
know.
ask them.
We wouldn't know. And sometimes I'm just think, practically speaking, I don't know how it works, but clearly it does, because they are Arhats. They are solitary realizers, Arhats. Then there is the circle of hearer Arhats, which is outside of them. They are defined as they seek liberation through hearing the Buddhist teachings. And I think we could safely say that everyone, I don't know, we can't say that. I was going to say all the ones that we read about in the Pali scriptures are hearer Arhats, but it's really possible that they are all enlightened beings, and we just don't know, right? So I'm not going to hedge, not even going to conjecture about that. But generally speaking, that's what we would assume, that they were hearer Arhats. Does that make a difference? For some people, it's actually really important, and it is important to know in the long term. In the short term, just to know that they have practiced the Buddhist path and removed the afflictive obscurations from their minds so that they're liberated from cyclic existence. Their minds are in the state of nirvana. And when they pass away, depending on from their ordinary body, at the time that they are enlightened, become awakened, time that they attain nirvana, there is some conjecture about whether they attain a mental body, according to the Mahayana teachings. There's some discussion that the Theravadan, or not the Theravadins, but that the fundamental vehicle says that their mind ceases. But the Theravadins say that that's not necessarily true. So that's a question. But from the Sanskrit tradition, they can attain a mental body and continue. Their minds in nirvana. So the point really for us is to see them as an example. That they have followed the path, they have followed these teachings, they can give the teachings, they have attained their goal. And therefore, we can see that it's possible. Now again, from the Mahayana perspective, once those arhats have been hanging out in their nirvana for a while, the Buddhas are said to come along and wake them up and say, you're not finished. Time to generate bodhicitta and keep going. That's again beyond my comprehension, really. But it does follow with the Mahayana view that ultimately there is one vehicle and everyone both has the capacity to become Buddha and will become Buddha. That's the Prasangika view. Yeah. Prasangika Madhyamaka view. So it's hopeful. It's helpful. They're there. They've done it. Beings have done it. We can read the scriptures and read about them. We can read the sutras and read about people who are on the path and follow their example. This I found very interesting too. I had not heard this before, but Venerable Children, when she was teaching this, she said, a Sangha usually means community, that's the word. But in the sense of the ultimate Sangha, it's not a community referring to people. It's a community referring to the gathering of paths and realizations. Paths and realizations. So that the ultimate Sangha Jewel, which is not the person, or a person, or the collection of persons, the ultimate Sangha Jewel, which is the realizations and the cessations in the mind, right? The paths and cessations. So she's saying it is the community or the gathering of paths and realizations. That's the community it's referring to. It's interesting to think about. And then this conventional Sangha Jewel is the persons that have those paths and realizations in their mind. And so that conventional Sangha Jewel does not have to be a community. It could be a community of Arya beings, or it could be one. The representation of the Sangha is for fully ordained monastics, with or without realizations. And it's a representation not to suggest that anyone has those realizations yet, but it is a representation because the Sangha is emulating and striving to emulate the characteristics of those who have those realizations, trying to live in a way that reflects that and that grows those qualities. So it's not just one Sangha person, unless that Sangha person is an Arya. It requires 4 fully ordained to be the representation of the Sangha. Now, I will say in his commentary, Geshe Sopa is a little more generous about that, and that in his view, any community that is striving together to develop qualities could be considered Sangha. Venerable Children is quite clear about the use of that term, not referring to just people at the Dharma Center because I mean, she will say, quite frankly, many people who come to the Dharma Center aren't even Buddhist. And if you want to have confidence in the refuge you're taking, you really want to have confidence in somebody that's inspiring you, right? And if we're all going to go out to the Dharma group and then go have a beer on the way home together, it's just not an activity, a shared activity that's going to inspire you and move you on towards your goal of becoming liberated and awakened, right? So that's a distinction that is, it's so common in America today. I mean, everybody's Sangha. Yoga people, yoga communities are now called Sangha. I mean, you don't even have to be Buddhist anymore to be Sangha. And, you know, that's just the use of a term. But when we are taking refuge in the context of this refuge practice, we need to be very clear about this. And then it all goes back to, as Venerable Pema was pointing out at the very beginning, all of these, everything in this refuge field is consolidated, you could say, in the Buddha. That's why when we do the simple visualization, you can say the Buddha is a representation of all three jewels. The Buddha is the Buddha jewel. The Buddha has the Dharma jewel in the Buddha's mind. That is the Buddha's mind. And the Buddha is Sangha jewel, has all those realizations and cessations. Right? So it's also good to know, even if you're doing the simpler visualization, why? Why is the Buddha a representation of all these three? So this is, in terms of our evolution, our personal Dharma revolution, first we study the Dharma, then we become the Sangha eventually, as we gain realizations, and through becoming Sangha, then we become Buddha as we continue to practice. Historically, on this planet, first the Buddha appeared. The Buddha taught the Dharma. By listening to the Dharma, the Sangha also happened on this planet. So there's different ways of how each of these affects. And, you know, as Geshe Sopa said, it's chicken and egg sort of thing. I mean, where did the Buddha come from? The Buddha also studied from previous Buddhas. The Buddha was also Sangha before he became Buddha on this planet. So how far back you want to go with that chain, don't know. But the interrelationship between these three is, I find, interesting to reflect on. Very interesting to reflect on. So, given that the Sangha is a difficult question for people, why and how do you take refuge in the Sangha? How does that work in your own mind? I'd like to hear from people. Yes, okay.
Well, at my level of progression, at this point, I really depend on daily for the Sangha representation in my teachers. I really trust, by watching them and listening to them over the years, that they are reliable guides for this person at this level. But when I do the visualizations and I'm going for the deeper long-term goal, they're part of that. But then I think about the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and His Holiness and so forth. But so I've got different levels depending where I am in my practice, daily or more in-depth long-term. But they interchange fairly easily for me.
Yeah, Tenzin.
I'm speaking, maybe I could be wrong, speaking from a Pali tradition perspective, the Sangha representing the 8 pairs, which is starting from the stream enterer. And then we can't really see the who are in the stream enterer, but basically they have already generated renunciation mind and still steer their mind towards the renunciations, seeing the true nature of reality. In fact, layperson monastics can be a beautiful Sangha to me. So that's why I see that they are actually helping me to stir my mind into a renunciation, the states of the mind. And that is so beautiful that follow them.
Hmm? Stream enters an aria, yeah. Yeah, but we don't know, he's right. We can't identify them. We don't know who any of these are. Yeah, they don't type up.
One thing I like about thinking about the Sangha is that there's just all these people who have realized emptiness. I mean, that's like, to me, it's like this encouragement that it's possible, that these realizations by following the path are possible.
Yeah,
That's where I like to go to.
yeah, thanks. That's helpful too. Oh, Pema?
I like the story of Shariputra seeing Asvajit, and just the sight of somebody who is subdued, and in that appearance is enough to trigger his past seeds to ripen.
Yeah.
And it's also been, I think the Tibetans talk about it a lot. And then I realized the Chinese also take this very much as the basis of all these training that they put into the conventional monastics, of why all that comportment. They explain it as, how an image, a visualization, like what Lama Yeshe would say, can affect people. Just seeing the robes.
Yeah, that's really true. I'm so glad you brought that up. I remember Venerable Jigme and I were ordained together, did our full ordination together, and that chant leader, the chant leader nun, was constantly talking about the power of the visualization and how important it was for monastics to be able to train in that comportment in order to inspire people. It's also why the Chinese monasteries in the don't let the lay people hang out with the monastics too much, I think. There was a hand here, and then we'll go back to Venerable. Yeah.
For me, when I think about realized beings, I think about the authors of many of the texts that we rely on, such as Lama Tsongkhapa, Chandrakirti, Shantideva, and really thinking of them as, as realized beings helps, and to not just say, okay, the literal words the Buddha taught is not the only thing I need to rely on, because there's also these other realized beings who have also created great texts that can help me on the path.
Yeah, very good, very good. And I remember Geshe Kelsang Wangmo talking about how important the commentaries are, because a time passes, language passes, culture passes, and you need a whole other generation to be able to give commentaries on what has come before. So it's not like even just they stopped at Chandrakirti, right? They keep these important commentaries need to keep coming to help us understand what the Buddha said. Yangchen.
I wonder if this thing about the ngondro and taking refuge is something that the Buddha said, or is just a Mahayana practice? Is it like in any sutras, or is just a Mahayana practice?
I don't know the source. I can't say that with any authority at all. Does anybody here? Yeah.
I think it's come from Marpa.
Mm-hmm.
That's my understanding. I can't remember where I've picked it up from, but in my memory, it's come from Marpa.
Yeah, well, let's investigate. That's a good question. But I think we can safely say that it came from Tibetan sources. Is this done in Chinese? No, I don't think so. Yeah. We'll look it up.
Pali does that. It's the Chinese tradition. They also do Nama Buddhaya, Nama Dhammaya, Nama Sanghaya.
But do they do the 100,000
Ngondro,
recitations?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Ngondro.
Yeah.
ngondro part of preliminary so that you can go into a 3-year
Going to
retreat.
Tantra. Actually, it's
So-
a preliminary to
So
Tantra.
those are, and then different sects of the Tibetan traditions have different ngondro. So this is your preparation to do
Yeah,
intense practice.
Yeah, that's true. It is intended as preparation for Vajrayana practice. Did it come from India or did this come from Tibet? Don't know. Anyway, we'll look it up. But yeah, it's true. Yes.
A question related to this. When we're visualizing the refuge field and our teachers are there, do we have the thought that may or may not be correct that they are Arya beings? Like I realize that in some contexts we think of all of our teachers as Buddhas, but in this context, for those of us who maybe don't typically practice at that level, should we see our teachers as Aryas?
Venerable Thubten had a good resource on this when she led that meditation the other morning. So I'm wondering if that was actually addressed. The thing about even having our teachers in the merit field, the refuge field, is that they are at this time, depending on how we hold them, representatives of the Buddha. They're representatives of the teaching. The idea that if the Buddha was here, would they say anything different from what your teachers are saying? I don't know. No. But also holding them in the refuge field as the personality of the person is where it gets tricky. So if it's very helpful to hold them as the personality of the person, this is why Venerable Children has suggests that we do the guru last, after we've done a lot of reflection on what these objects of refuge are, so that we understand that in this, we're looking at the ultimate guru being the Buddha, and how that Buddha is expressed through all of these ways. So depending on the level of your relationship with a teacher, whether it's, this is my Vinaya master, or this is just the person I took refuge with, or this is the person I took Bodhisattva vows with, or this is the person I take tantric initiations with, we have different levels of how we are to perceive and understand that teacher teaching. So if it's helpful, I think, in that context, this person is a representative of the Buddha, or this is the person through whom the Buddha speaks to me, that's one thing. If we're going to grab onto the idea that my teacher is an arhat, be very careful. Be very, very careful. Do you have thoughts on how that's expressed, especially in the the teaching you've done with the?
I would just say, go back to Venerable's and His Holiness's description. Is it in volume 2 or? I think it's in volume 2, where she talked about relying on a spiritual teacher and the different levels. That is such a great guide. Then you decide how you want to hold your teacher.
Yeah.
It's said that if we hold our teacher as a Buddha, and we can actually do that, understanding the qualities, we get the merit of relying on that teacher as a Buddha, and the relationship we have and what the actions that we do in relation to them. But that takes a lot of maturity.
And it's totally from our side. Right? If we understand that we gain the benefit of seeing the teacher as Buddha from our own mind, and not trying to claim or grab onto that Buddha and make that a solid fixed thing, then that's the difference. If we hold that my teacher is a Buddha, regardless of whether they are a Buddha or not, which is kind of none of our business actually, then that's great. But that's hard. That part is hard. I wanted to close with this quote from Lama Tsongkhapa, and that might be the subject of a very short discussion for people who want to discuss, where he says, he's quoting the Dharma Samgati, correct compendium of the teachings, and it says, think, the Arya Sangha, I'm changing the translation a little bit, the Arya Sangha teaches the Dharma, practices it, reflects on it. It is the Dharma's sphere. It upholds the Dharma. entrusts itself to the Dharma, worships the Dharma, and conducts itself according to the Dharma. It has the excellent Dharma as its sphere of activity and is the most excellent practitioner of the Dharma. It is naturally honest and pure. It is endowed with the quality of compassion and has great compassion. It always has solitude as its field of activity, is always absorbed in the Dharma, and always practices virtue. Those are some powerful comments. The Arya Sangha teaches the Dharma, practices it, reflects on it, is the Dharma sphere, upholds the teachings, entrusts itself to the teaching, worships the teaching, is living in, abides in the Dharma. So if we're looking at the ultimate Sangha Jewel, with these realizations and cessations in their minds, they're completely immersed. If we look at being some aspect of a representation of the Dharma, then this is our sort of our, I was going to say, exhortation towards conduct and behavior of how to train the mind to uphold the teaching and trust ourselves to the teaching, conduct ourselves according to the teaching, as the teaching is this, or the Dharma as the sphere of activity, is the most excellent practitioner of the Dharma, as an aspiration for becoming Arya Sangha. That quote is in, I don't have the page number right here, but it is under, in Lama Chenmo, Volume 1, under the section on taking refuge, the good qualities of the Sangha. Yeah. So that's our aspiration, and that's what we're looking for. So that's the Sangha. Comments, questions? Yes.
There's some clarification questions online. Someone's asking, is Venerable Chodron's recommended order for the mantra recitation Namo Buddhaya Dharmaya Sanghaya Guruya?
Meaning, if you're just doing the recitation, all four of them, do them in order. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. If you are doing 100,000 or so of each and working on the ngondro in that way, then the recommendation is to do 100,000 Buddhas first, 100,000 Dharmas second, 100,000 Sanghas third, then 100,000 Gurus.
And then another person asks, what poetic sources were you reading from when you were praising?
So today I was reading from The Splendor of an Autumn Mood, Lama Tsongkhapa's Praise of the Buddha, although he has several. I think this one is just called Praise of the Buddha. Yeah.
And then one more question. Does the Guru represent the gratitude of all our teachers?
The gratitude of all our teachers.
And they go on and say, like when the Buddha told the Jain follower who converted to Buddhism to still pay respects and support his previous teachers.
So the question is, is it literally, if I were like a previous practitioner of Christianity, would I hold my ministers or my priest in the same light as I'm holding my Dharma teachers? Is that the question? Am I hearing it right? Not so clear. No. I mean, it's interesting to think about teachers after thinking about, just from this, I'm just speaking personally, this isn't the direct answer to the question, but after learning about how to respect a teacher, how to honor a teacher, how to develop, how to properly relate to a teacher, I see that I have had plenty of teachers in my life, none of whom I have behaved correctly with. I can say across the board. I think none. Even the ones I most admired and learned from, I have always been arrogant, disrespectful, and, a little twit, really. In a certain kind of way. I mean, I'm not bashing myself that much, but like to really honor and respect what a teacher is in a person's life, like any kind of teacher. Maybe we've had some mentors that we really, really respect and see the value of what they've given, but as I began to think, doing the meditation on the kindness of others and thinking about the secular teachers I've had in my life, people who have shaped my life in incredible ways, very rarely have I had the awareness and the recognition and the gratitude and appreciation for the value of what I received from those teachers. So if you are holding it in that kind of way and want to appreciate the kindness that we've received from people who have taught us, from my uncle teaching me to tie my shoes in church one Sunday. I mean, you can go way back. If I had never learned to tie my shoes, I'd, have broken bones or something. Then that's one thing. But if we are looking at who are the beings we now take refuge in, then one of the guidelines that we'll get to, I think, next week of taking refuge is that we don't take refuge in any other beings outside of the Dharma, that we now have chosen the Dharma as our spiritual path. We know the direction, we know the Buddha is a reliable guide, we know what the Buddha teaches is infallible, we know that the Sangha that practices it are heading in that direction of that, for the attainments that the Buddha has promised, and that our teachers are the vehicle by which all of this comes to us. And so as a source of refuge, then that's who belongs in our refuge field, not the person who taught me how to write a declarative sentence, which is a very, very important thing to know. And some people never learned that. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah, last one.
Difference between guru and root guru, right? Like we can have many teachers, but we can only have one root teacher.
You can have, actually, Venerable said, didn't we say this recently in our teaching? We heard from her. She said you could have more than one root guru, but it's at different levels. But generally, when they talk about the root guru in a very general definition, is the person who really makes the Dharma come alive for you, the person whose teaching most inspired you or guided you. Okay, that was our discussion for today. So let's take a minute to do a little bit of digestion meditation. And think especially about the qualities of the Sangha. Strengthen our aspiration to become true Sangha. And rejoice at the opportunities we have. Let's dedicate. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forever.